this month's Epic Challenge Silhouettes. So this month's Epic Challenge is all about silhouettes. And silhouettes are about having an image that's really just an outline that doesn't have any content within the outline, but the outline still gives a good feeling of what the object that you're photographing is. And there's a number of different ways to do that. You can watch tutorials that tell you about using off-camera flash behind screens or behind the person, or like I just did right now with light shining on a white wall behind me and no light in front of me so that the camera can't see, or it has contrast and makes my image look black. Another way to do it is to put your object in front of a cloth and put a light behind the cloth. So here's one way to set things up. I've got a background scrim, which is really just one of the 5-in-1 reflectors. You take all the reflectors off the outside and what you get is a nice scrim in the middle that reduces the light. I've got two big work lights in behind it to give me lots of light from behind. And I've got my subject here, good old little Rodney from the movie Flushed Away, where he gets flushed down the toilet. Now Rodney has a little compass in his belly here, but that's not really going to matter because we're going to take a silhouette of Rodney, so we're not going to actually see that compass. I'm going to set him right there. All I got here is a chair just to put him on, and I'm going to get my camera ready. Okay, so here's my camera settings. Now I've got it set right now on shutter priority. You can see the TV over there, and that's what I'm going to take the picture of the scrim of to get an exposure value for my camera. So I take that picture of the scrim, I get the light, I get the settings, and it's going to show up on the screen there, and it's going to tell me what to put in. Then I change my camera to manual mode, and that's a shutter speed of 200 and an f-stop of 16 and an ISO of 250. And that just happens to be the settings that were right from the background that I had there, and I like those. So now that I'm all set up for my shot, I'm going to go and take it, and this is what it looks like. Now you notice the background isn't as bright as it was, and that's because when I set my exposure, I set it for that light. So the exposure was actually quite low. But the foreground is still black. Because there's two work lights in the back there, it actually looks like some kind of sparkling disco going on behind him, and that's kind of a cool effect. And when you look at the chair, you can actually see some of the bleed over of that light onto the chair, which actually gives some definition to the floor as well, which is kind of cool too, adds to the picture. Now I could do some other things here. I could change the background color. I could do that either by putting a colored gel over the lights if I have one, or changing the background scrim so that it's a different color, or even just going into Photoshop and changing that color to a different color and give it a whole different mood. Now you got to put your imagination into it again. You got to be creative. You got to think of different things that might look good as a silhouette. Obviously a block is not going to look good as a silhouette. If you're going to take a picture of a face as a silhouette, you're not going to be looking straight on. You have to look at a profile so that you can see the nose and the definition of different parts of the face. You could take silhouettes of flowers. You could take silhouettes of kids. You could take silhouettes of bicycles. You could take silhouettes of people. You could take silhouettes of light stands. You could take silhouettes of just about anything that has some shape to it. Now as far as your camera settings go, you're going to have to either go manual or again use your exposure compensation to be able to adjust the camera so that it's exposed properly. Because if you don't, the camera is going to want to try to expose to the subject. And that usually is the thing that's right in front of it. So if it's exposing to the subject, that means that your faces or whatever the object is that's in front is going to be exposed more properly, and the background is going to be all blown out. If that's a sky, you're not going to get any color in it. If it's a light or something that you had color in, you're not going to get the color there either. If you want a detail in the background and the silhouette to be in front of it, it's going to be gone. So you're going to have to use manual or you're going to have to use exposure compensation. Now if you use manual mode, the best way to do that is to take an exposure of the light itself. So if you're shooting a silhouette against a sunset, you're going to take a picture of the sunset first. Then you're going to play back the image, and when you play back the image, you're going to take note of the shutter speed and the aperture and the ISO that you shot that image with to get the proper exposure of the sky. Then you're going to switch to manual mode, and you're going to enter those numbers into your shutter speed and your aperture and your ISO. Now the camera is fixed at that exposure. Then you're going to place your object in front of it, the people, the object that you've decided on for your image, and you're going to take the image again. This time, because the sky is exposed behind and the people themselves are not lit, you're going to get a nice silhouette. Now, if you're using exposure compensation, it actually is more complicated in this case than using the manual. If you're going to use the exposure compensation, then you kind of have to look at your viewfinder or find some other way to get an idea of what the image is like, maybe by taking several images to get it right. What you're going to do is you're going to point the camera at your subject with the light behind it just the way you want it, and you're going to take a picture. And then you're going to have to adjust the exposure compensation down. You want less light hitting the sensor. When you adjust it down, what you're doing is causing the foreground to become darker. The background also becomes darker, of course, but because it's light, it should still show up in your image. You keep adjusting down until your image is just right. That's the one you want. Now you might find, depending on your settings, that your camera can't quite get low enough. So you might have to play with your shutter speed and aperture and your ISO to get the exposure compensation to go as low as you want it to. So that's it. Another easy challenge, right? Get out there, be creative, and good luck with this month's Epic Challenge. See you next month.